Driven to Win presents Son of the White Wolf, Chapter 3, The Call of Blood. He didn't choose the path of blood. It called to him. Let's begin. The sun was not long risen over the saw-edged mountains to the east, but already the heat was glazing the cloudless sky to the hue of white-hot steel. Along the dim road that split the immensity of the desert, a single shape moved. The shape grew out of the heat hazes of the south and resolved itself into a man on a camel. The man was no Arab. His boots and khakis, as well as the rifle butt jutting from beneath his knee, spoke of the West. But with his dark face and hard frame, he did not look out of place, even in that fierce land. He was Francis Xavier Gordon, El Borak, whom men loved, feared or hated, according to their political complexion, from the Golden Horn to the headwaters of the Ganges. He had ridden most of the night, but his iron frame had not yet approached the fringes of weariness. Another mile, and he sighted a yet dimmer trail straggling down from a range of hills to the east. Something was coming along this trail, a crawling something that left a broad, dark smear on the hot flints. Gordon swung his camel into the trail, and a moment later bent over the man who lay there gasping stertorously. It was a young Arab, and the breast of his abba was soaked in blood. Yusuf! Gordon drew back the wet abba, glanced at the bared breast, then covered it again. Blood oozed steadily from a blue-rimmed bullet hole. There was nothing he could do. Already the Arab's eyes were glazing. Gordon stared up the trail, seeing neither horse nor camel anywhere, but the dark smear stained the stones as far as he could see. My God, man, how far have you crawled in this condition? An hour. Many hours. I do not know, panted Yusuf. I fainted and fell from the saddle. When I came to, I was lying in the trail and my horse was gone, but I knew you would be coming up from the south, so I crawled. Crawled! Allah, how hard are thy stones! Gordon set a canteen to his lips, and Yusuf drank noisily, then clutched Gordon's sleeve with clawing fingers. El Borak, I am dying, and that is no great matter. But there is the matter of vengeance. Not for me, Yazidi, but for innocent ones. You know I was on furlough to my village, El Awad. I am the only man of El Awad who fights for Arabia. The elders are friendly to the Turks, but last night the Turks burned El Awad. They marched in before midnight and the people welcomed them, while I hid in a shed. Then without warning they began slaying. The men of El Awad were unarmed and helpless. I slew one soldier myself. Then they shot me and I dragged myself away, found my horse and rode to tell the tale before I died. Ah, Allah, I have tasted of perdition this night. Did you recognize their officer? Asked Gordon. I never saw him before. They called this leader of theirs Osman Pasha. Their flag bore the head of a white wolf. I saw it by the light of the burning huts. My people cried out in vain that they were friends. There was a German woman and a man of Hauran who came to El Awad from the east, just at nightfall. I think they were spies. The Turks shot him and took her captive. It was all blood and madness. Mad indeed, muttered Gordon. Yusuf lifted himself on an elbow and groped for him, a desperate urgency in his weakening voice. El Borak, I fought well for the Emir Faisal and for Lawrence Effendi, and for you. I was at Yenbo, and Ware, and Aqaba. Never have I asked a reward. I ask now, justice and vengeance. Grant me this plea. Slay the Turkish dogs who butchered my people. Gordon did not hesitate. They shall die, he answered. Yusuf smiled fiercely, gasped, Allahu Akbar, then sank back dead. Within the hour Gordon rode eastward. The vultures had already gathered in the sky with their grisly foreknowledge of death, then flapped sullenly away from the cairn of stones he had piled over the dead man. Yusuf. Gordon's business in the north could wait. One reason for his dominance over the Orientals was the fact that in some ways his nature closely resembled theirs. He not only understood the cry for vengeance, but he sympathized with it, and he always kept his promise. But he was puzzled. The destruction of a friendly village was not customary, even by the Turks, and certainly they would not ordinarily have mishandled their own spies. If they were deserters, they were acting in an unusual manner, for most deserters made their way to Faisal. And that wolf's head banner, Gordon knew that certain fanatics in the new Turks party were trying to erase all signs of Arab culture from their civilization. This was an impossible task, since that civilization itself was based on Arabic culture. But he had heard that, in Istanbul, the radicals even advocated abandoning Islam and reverting to the paganism of their ancestors. But he had never believed the tale. The sun was sinking over the mountains of Edom when Gordon came to ruined El Awad, in a fold of the bare hills. For hours before he had marked its location by black dots dropping in the blue. That they did not rise again told him that the village was deserted except for the dead. As he rode into the dusty street, several vultures flapped heavily away. The hot sun had dried the mud, curdled the red pools in the dust. He sat in his saddle a while, staring silently. He was no stranger to the handiwork of the Turk. He had seen much of it in the long fighting up from Jeddah on the Red Sea. But even so, he felt sick. The bodies lay in the street, headless, disemboweled, hewn asunder. Bodies of children, old women, and men. A red mist floated before his eyes, so that for a moment the landscape seemed to swim in blood. The slayers were gone, but they had left a plain road for him to follow. What the signs they had left did not show him, he guessed. The slayers had loaded their female captives on baggage camels and had gone eastward, deeper into the hills. Why they were following that road he could not guess, but he knew where it led, to the long-abandoned walls of Suleiman, by way of the well of Ahmed. Without hesitation, he followed. He had not gone many miles before he passed more of their work. A baby, its brains oozing from its broken head. Some kidnapped woman had hidden her child in her robes until it had been wrenched from her and brained on the rocks, before her eyes. The country became wilder as he went. He did not halt to eat, but munched dried dates from his pouch as he rode. He did not waste time worrying over the recklessness of his action. One lone American dogging the crimson trail of a Turkish raiding party. He had no plan. His future actions would depend on the circumstances that arose. But he had taken the death trail and he would not turn back while he lived. He was no more foolhardy than his grandfather, who single-handedly trailed an Apache war party for days through the Guadalupes and returned to the settlement on the Pecos with scalps hanging from his belt. The sun had set and dusk was closing in when Gordon topped a ridge and looked down on the plain whereon stands the well of Akhmet with its straggling palm grove. To the right of that cluster stood the tents, horse lines and camel lines of a well-ordered force. To the left stood a hut used by travelers as a khan. The door was shut and a sentry stood before it. While he watched, a man came from the tents with a bowl of food, which he handed in at the door. Gordon could not see the occupant, but he believed it was the German girl of whom Yusuf had spoken. Though why they should imprison one of their own spies was one of the mysteries of this strange affair. He saw their flag and could make out a splotch of white that must be the wolf's head. He saw, too, the Arab women, 35 or 40 of them herded into a pen improvised from bales and pack saddles. They crouched together dumbly, dazed by their misfortunes. He had hidden his camel below the ridge, on the western slope, and he lay concealed behind a clump of stunted bushes until night had fallen. Then he slipped down the slope, circling wide to avoid the mounted patrol, which rode leisurely about the camp. He lay prone behind a boulder till it had passed, then rose and stole toward the hut. Fires twinkled in the darkness beneath the palms, and he heard the wailing of the captive women. The sentry before the door of the hut did not see the cat-footed shadow that glided up to the rear wall. As Gordon drew close, he heard voices within. They spoke in Turkish. One window was in the back wall. Strips of wood had been fastened over it to serve as both pane and bars. Peering between them, Gordon saw a slender girl in a travel-worn riding habit standing before a dark-faced man in a Turkish uniform. There was no insignia to show what his rank had been. The Turk played with a riding whip, and his eyes gleamed with cruelty in the light of a candle on a camp table. "What do I care for the information you bring from Baghdad?" he was demanding. "Neither Turkey nor Germany means anything to me, but it seems you fail to realize your own position. It is mine to command, you to obey. You are my prisoner, my captive, my slave. It's time you learned what that means. And the best teacher I know is the whip." He fairly spat the last word at her and she paled. "You dare not subject me to this indignity," she whispered weakly. Gordon knew this man must be Osman Pasha. He drew his heavy automatic from its scabbard under his armpit and aimed at the Turk's breast through the crack in the window. But even as his finger closed on the trigger, he changed his mind. There was the sentry at the door, and 100 other armed men within hearing, whom the sound of a shot would bring on the run. He grasped the window bars and braced his legs. "I must dispel your illusions," muttered Osman, moving toward the girl who cowered back until the wall stopped her. Her face was white. She had dealt with many dangerous men in her hazardous career, and she was not easily frightened. But she had never met a man like Osman. His face was a terrifying mask of cruelty. The ferocity that gloats over the agony of a weaker thing shone in his eyes. Suddenly he had her by the hair, dragging her to him, laughing at her scream of pain. Just then, Gordon ripped the strips off the window. The snapping of the wood sounded, loud as a gunshot, and Osman wheeled, drawing his pistol. As Gordon came through the window, the American hid on his feet, leveled automatic checking Osman's move. The Turk froze, his pistol lifted shoulder high, muzzle pointing at the roof. Outside, the sentry called anxiously. "Answer him," grated Gordon below his breath. "Tell him everything is all right, and drop that gun." The pistol fell to the floor, and the girl snatched it up. "Come here, Fräulein." She ran to him, but in her haste, she crossed the line of fire. In that fleeting moment when her body shielded his, Osman acted. He kicked the table and the candle toppled and went out, and simultaneously, he dived for the floor. Gordon's pistol roared deafeningly, just as the hut was plunged into darkness. The next instant, the door crashed inward and the sentry bulked against the starlight, to crumple as Gordon's gun crashed again and yet again. With a sweep of his arm, Gordon found the girl and drew her toward the window. He lifted her through as if she had been a child, and climbed through after her. He did not know whether his blind slug had struck Osman or not. The man was crouching silently in the darkness, but there was no time to strike a match and see whether he was living or dead. But as they ran across the shadowy plain, they heard Osman's voice lifted in passion. By the time they reached the crest of the ridge, the girl was winded. Only Gordon's arm about her waist, half dragging, half carrying her, enabled her to make the last few yards of the steep incline. The plain below them was alive with torches and shouting men. Osman was yelling for them to run down the fugitives, and his voice came faintly to them on the ridge. "Take them alive, curse you! Scatter and find them! It's El Borak!" An instant later, he was yelling with an edge of panic. In his voice, "Wait! Come back! Take cover and make ready to repel an attack. He may have a horde of Arabs with him. He thinks first of his own desires, and only later of the safety of his men," muttered Gordon. "I don't think he'll ever get very far. Come on." He led the way to the camel, helped the girl into the saddle, then leaped up himself. A word, a tap of the camel wand, and the beast ambled silently off down the slope. "I know Osman caught you at El Awad," said Gordon. "But what's he up to? What's his game?" "He was a lieutenant stationed at El Ashraf," she answered. "He persuaded his company to mutiny, kill their commander and desert. He plans to fortify the walls of Suleiman and build a new empire. I thought at first he was mad, but he isn't. He's a devil. The walls of Suleiman? Gordon checked his mount and sat for a moment motionless in the starlight. Are you game for an all-night ride? He asked presently. Anywhere. As long as it is far away from Osman. There was a hint of hysteria in her voice. I doubt if your escape will change his plans. He'll probably lie about Ahmet all night under arms expecting an attack. In the morning, he will decide that I was alone and pull out for the walls. Well, I happen to know that an Arab force is there, waiting for an order from Lawrence to move on to Agaili. 300 Juhayna camel riders, sworn to Faisal. Enough to eat Osman's gang. Lawrence's messenger should reach them sometime between dawn and noon. There is a chance we can get there before the Juhayna pull out. If we can, we'll turn them on Osman and wipe him out with his whole pack. It won't upset Lawrence's plans for the Juhayna to get to Agaili a day late, and Osman must be destroyed. He's a mad dog running loose. His ambition sounds mad, she murmured. But when he speaks of it, with his eyes blazing, it's easy to believe he might even succeed. You forget that crazier things have happened in the desert, he answered as he swung the camel eastward. The world is being made over here, as well as in Europe. There's no telling what damage this Osman might do, if left to himself. The Turkish Empire is falling to pieces, and new empires have risen out of the ruins of old ones. But if we can get to Suleiman before the Juhayna march, we'll check him. If we find them gone, we'll be in a pickle ourselves. It's a gamble, our lives against his. Are you game? Till the last card falls, she retorted. His face was a blur in the starlight, but she sensed rather than saw his grim smile of approval. The camel's hooves made no sound as they dropped down the slope and circled far wide of the Turkish camp. Like ghosts on a ghost camel, they moved across the plain under the stars. A faint breeze stirred the girl's hair. Not until the fires were dim behind them and they were again climbing a hill road did she speak. I know you. You're the American they call El Borak, the Swift. You came down from Afghanistan when the war began. You were with King Hussein even before Lawrence came over from Egypt. Do you know who I am? Yes. Then what's my status? She asked. Have you rescued me or captured me? Am I a prisoner? Let us say companion, for the time being, he suggested. We're up against a common enemy. No reason why we shouldn't make common cause, is there? None, she agreed, and leaning her blonde head against his hard shoulder, she went soundly to sleep. A gaunt moon rose, pushing back the horizons, flooding craggy slopes and dusty plains with leprous silver. The vastness of the desert seemed to mock the tiny figures on their tiring camel as they rode blindly on toward what fate they could not guess. His hands were stained, but his destiny had only begun to bleed. Chapter 4 arrives tomorrow. Stay with us.